We're gonna go ahead and kick off the executive committee for PCE Monday, June 9th, 2025. I'm going to go ahead and ask, our, business meeting manager, Nellie, to please call to
Really?
order.
Who's
I
that?
gave her a
Title.
promotion.
I gave her a new title.
I was like, what do we call Nellie?
She's our board
Our,
queen.
our queen facilitator, to call the meeting to order, roll call, and any other.
Good.
requests we need.
like that.
Okay, when I call your jurisdiction, if you'll please state your name, San Mateo County. And Director Gaucher is just going to be a little late today, which we already know. Atherton, thank you. Brisbane,
Colleen Macklin.
thank you. Burlingame,
Donna Wilson.
thank you. Hillsborough,
Leslie Ragsdale.
thank you. Menlo Park,
Betsy Nash.
thank you. Millbrae, San Bruno,
Marty Medina.
thank you. San Mateo. Okay, and we have a quorum. Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and take public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And move to an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda items.
So
We have a motion by Vice Chair Medina,
I'll second.
second by Director Ragsdale or Leslie. All those in favor or roll call? Do we need a roll call vote on this?
Nope.
Nope, because we, okay, so all those in, oh, do we have Adam, Lorraine on?
Yes, but because his address wasn't posted.
Oh, we're gonna
publicly,
just, he's gonna be a member of the public.
Kind of, he's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's not allowed to give comment or
yeah, he's observing.
speak, he
Yes,
can
he
just
can't
observe.
vote, but I think he can speak as a member of the public. He just can't vote.
Not according to our legal counsel's
Oh, okay.
advice.
Okay.
Hi, this
That
is
doesn't
Jen.
wrong.
Yeah, I would,
It's what Our legal counsel also
Said same.
says the same for Hillsborough. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's, I think, I don't know if it's new or something, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, whatever legal counsel says, legal counsel gets. So thank you. Thank you, Adam, for at least joining us. All right, and we will solve that in the future, right? We'll just have a standing item for
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay,
yep.
so in the future, we're gonna have a standing item for him. Cause
Yep,
I
we will work that out.
gave him the opportunity to participate, do that, because that was the only way he could do it. And we wanna make sure we're really inclusive.
We appreciate your devotion, Adam. Thank you.
Let's go.
All right, so may I have a roll call? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone with a nay? Nope, okay, motion carries unanimously. So our regular agenda chair report, don't really have much to report out other than we're gonna continue to work on our review of all the subcommittees. We're gonna start that in July. That's pretty much it. I also just really want to thank the staff for all the including Mark in particular, for all the legislative work. The legislature, and I was with Assemblywoman Pappen yesterday for a couple hours, and the amount of bills that they're digesting and working through right now is like 423, I think she said. It's a lot just in that, so they're really, really having a lot. And I really appreciate our staff kind of shepherding and guiding Mark especially and keeping us all posted on literally the day-to-day changes that are happening on these bills. Other than that, really no other big
Okay.
deal reports.
Good.
CEO Sean.
Okay. Next slide, please. Great. I just have a couple of updates for the executive committee since we last met a couple of weeks ago at the board. The first of which is to thank several of you in this room who participated in our first CAISO tour on May 30th. Betsy Nash, Anders Fung. We also had Christine Bowles and Leslie Ragsdale. So thank you all for coming. We had a handful of staff. Hopefully you found it useful.
Incredibly.
Yeah, very.
It was
interesting.
amazing. Highly recommend you guys to make the next day. I know it's a full day, but it's worth it.
Great, thank you so much. And we will do a second one, as we've noted, in November. We also have the Diablo Canyon Tour. I believe that is September 29th. So if you're interested, please be in touch with Nellie for joining that. I also do want to thank several of you who participated in the Reach Code dinner down in Mountain View. Apparently, I'm sorry that I could not be there. Shalini and the rest of our team was, but apparently that went very well and was also well received. Last week, we had our quarterly staff meeting. We met again at Cooley Landing, which is in East Palo Alto. And then in the afternoon, took a tour of North Fair Oaks and heard from several of our PCE community partners in that area, talking about our programs and how they're working out in the community. So it was a day well spent together. A little bit of unfortunate news, your board approved a contract for the Right Best project 2 weeks ago-ish. The very next day, the federal administration issued guidelines around foreign entities of concern. Don't need to go into all of that, but the net effect of that is that we are delayed in getting that contract countersigned. We will be discussing this later today in the procurement subcommittee. Roy is on the line and there will be much more detail. The news there is that it does not change any significant terms within the contract, so pricing is all going to be the same, et cetera. What it does change is COD, the commercial operation date, which we've seen multiple times, unfortunate reality these days. And it also changes the date at which the developer is going to pay a security deposit on the project. These are all tied to the big, bad, beautiful bill and adoption therein in August. So they're essentially waiting until they see what these impacts are. Because the foreign entity of concern, in my view, essentially it's a different mechanism, right? But it puts the same level of pressure as the tariffs on product coming in from China. And it's where it's originating. So more to say in procurement. But I'm just letting you guys know that happened the very next day and we're working through it as we do on all of these. I also want to let you know and thank some of you who are on the committee. The PCE marketing subcommittee, Betsy, Colleen, John Dugan, James Coleman, and Mike Amabil are on the marketing subcommittee. That name has temporarily been changed to the PCE naming committee. Gwen will be coming in at the next executive committee meeting to just provide an update on what's going on with that. We're in our second round of sort of looking at possibilities, and I would say so far it's going pretty well. And we have a firm called Lexicon that's top notch in helping us out with that. So more to come. I also just am following up on somebody's question from a while ago about AI and how PCE uses, maybe that was you, Betsy. Maybe Anders, I don't know. Bottom line is we have, are in development with some AI user guidelines. Stopping short of a policy, but really putting some guardrails around how PCE uses AI, in what ways, on what platforms. We will likely be moving into an enterprise account with ChatGPT and possibly Claude. But all of those, we're sort of running the traps on data security and all the different elements, legal, looking at what other CCAs are doing, looking at what the county is doing. We did have our first all staff training on AI last week, with more to come through the rest of this year. So just letting you guys know that we kicked that off. Last
Is
quick.
that gonna cut down on staff need?
Not at this time, no. I mean, at this point, what we're trying to do is figure out, what is the best and highest use for AI at PCE, whether that's marketing, imagery, whether that's possibly helping us with some of our compliance reporting to the extent that it's duplicative.
Customer service maybe?
Maybe customer call center, all of these things TBD. I think the thought here is that it will amplify and improve our work product. Do I think that it's gonna result in a reduction in staff at this time? No, I do.
Doesn't it mean you have to look at less data material because GPT does it for you?
I mean, yes and no, right? Because one of the things that's in the top 10, we're just, developing our what do you call that? The 10 commandments of AI. So one of them is you are responsible for the work product that you
Yeah,
have.
you have to review it for
Yeah,
sure. and
But
change
it can help you draft things, it can help you generate a first draft. But at the end of the day, we as individuals are responsible for the work.
Actually research real fast.
Yeah, so I think the thing that we want to say here is that we're not shying away from AI. We want to use it proactively and smartly and strategically, rather than just say it's not out there, because why? We have several folks on our team who are already using it personally and use it a lot. So our idea here is to say, what is the appropriate use? What are the guardrails around which our staff engages with it? And don't use your personal account. So we're saying, if you're gonna use it, let's do it using a PCE account so that there's a separation of church and state between personal and professional.
And I think even though we don't expect decline in staff, we are seeing increase demands on our time and analysis and try to have this philosophy of doing more with less or doing more with the same.
same.
And so I think
More with the
AI will facilitate that and allow us to hopefully minimize the additions going forward. So maybe beyond that, there could be
Yeah.
reduction.
Yes.
I think that's exactly the philosophy that I was gonna get at, do more with the same. And how to do better with the same. If the work product in the end has high quality and more thorough, that in itself is already a win. Perhaps, maybe we can, with the same resources that we already have, we can do more. And do better,
Exactly right.
and that's.
So I would really call this a period of discovery and not wanting this to be a runaway train and just knowing what we're doing.
Two related and unrelated thoughts. One is just, I know we're not officially discussing it, but as a consumer, the personal touch makes a huge difference. And so I would never want to get rid of the call center. Obviously, we're not discussing that now, but just my 2 cents. And also I was doing a bunch of research poking around for my town role yesterday. And poking around about, what can I learn more about heat pumps and all this stuff and who waives fees and all of that. And almost every search that I made, PCE came up
Oh, good.
right away. And I know that's something that the marketing team has worked on. And so I just want to applaud them for that.
We're training the AI.
Yes.
There's a whole new vocabulary around this thing and you have to train it. So
And PCE is always coming out, so.
that's great. Okay. Any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, any members of the public that have comments on the CEO report?
One thing, sorry, I should have
Please.
mentioned this to Sean. We did send out a memo a couple days ago or last week on cybersecurity. Rick, I know you had asked a
yes.
couple questions or asked for maybe a little more detail. We decided we didn't want to, given the sensitivity of the topic and giving people a roadmap of what we do and vulnerabilities and areas of improvement, we sent it in confidentiality in a memo. So hopefully that addresses. It's not as, we'd love to be able to talk about it, but just given the situation, the public nature of these meetings. So hopefully you saw that on your inbox. Good.
Thank you, Nick.
Yes.
One more comment just about your visit to North Fair Oaks. I'm wondering if, something that we're finding is people have older homes with knob and tube. And that's becoming a huge issue as far as being able to electrify. Even with we have a $4.5 million grant from the state. And even finding homes that don't have that knob and tube, as you know.
Yeah.
So just
Actually,
wanna-
we just had a chat about that on Friday. And so we're gonna follow up with you and your city manager directly, because you're absolutely right. Those are a challenge that were somewhat unanticipated in older homes. Yeah. So more on that.
Great.
Chair Colson.
Oh, sorry, yes.
It looks like Director Gaucher has joined as a member of the public. So she has her hand raised at the moment. I'm going, she maybe lowered her hand. Oh, no, it's up again.
Same problem.
Same problem, I mean, not problem, but same
Issue.
restraints as Adam is
I
facing.
do have one question for Director Gaucher, which is, are you joining us eventually? Or is she joining us eventually, or is she gonna take the whole meeting remote? Because we can always take her question and defer to when she arrives. I just,
No, I'm in the office today. There's a lot going on in the county.
oh, okay.
All are well aware. Just wanted to make a comment, but I can also reach out to Sean and just follow up on the AI.
Let's do that, Lisa, because legal counsel is telling us that without you and Adam being noticed on our agenda as to your
Okay.
location with proper noticing, that we would be in violation, even as a member of the public.
Okay, I will reach out to Sean.
Perfect, that's
Thank you.
great, thank you. Okay. All right, no members of the public. We'll move on to item 4, which is the Board of Directors approval of the fiscal year 2025 budget, which is an action item.
Great. Morning, everyone. I am going to walk you all through the budget. We are asking for a vote at the end to recommend approval to the full board in a couple weeks. I'll take some time going through the numbers since this is the first time you've seen it. We just walked the Audit and Finance Committee through it right before this meeting, so apologize. Donna, you'll have to hear it twice.
No worries.
And then we also went through with the Finance Committee a month ago. We've been working on this since March or so. We're sort of on the 5-yard line, about to cross the end zone. As I mentioned, we did present a draft to the Finance Committee last month. They were generally supportive, no material changes on the cost side. There has the one big development that's happened in the last month, and I think people in this room are aware of, is there was a proposed decision issued on the PCIA OIR, Order Instituting Rulemaking. The IOUs have been complaining for some time about the calculation of the PCIA and have asked the commission to look into that. We've been advocating primarily through Cal CCA. Unfortunately, the proposed decision was not what we were hoping. It is going to adjust the methodology for calculating specifically resource adequacy. That's part of track 1. There's a second track, which is going to look at all the other components of the PCIA. But track 1 just looked at resource adequacy, which is a big input into the calculation of the PCIA. The proposed decision, if it's adopted, I think later this month, will result in lower RA prices, which go into this calculation, and as a result, a pretty significant increase in the PCIA in 2025 and 2026. 2025, which is the year we're in now, obviously, that is going to be basically captured next year. So the problem is it's kind of a double whammy, to use a technical term. It's going to be caught up in next year, and I'm going to show you on the next page why that's causing us some significant headwinds in the end of fiscal year 26 for us, and then all of years fiscal year 27. It is kind of a one-time adjustment, and PCIA we do envision, it's a forecast coming back down in the out years of the forecast, but fiscal year 27 for us is a specific challenge, which we have some tools at our disposal, the Rate Stabilization Fund, which will help us manage that. As I just mentioned, we presented a revised budget to the Audit and Finance Committee right before this meeting. In summary, total costs are about $394 million. This is a 5% decrease year over year, which is great news for our customers, and that's primarily due to the cost of energy, which I'll go into a little more detail. And on the revenue side, we are forecasting about $381 million, which is a 16% decrease year over year, which is great news for our customers. And that's also $23 million lower than the budget, which we presented about a month ago, not to this group, but to the Finance Committee. And that's primarily due to updated PCIA assumptions and the PD that I just mentioned. PCIA is a topic that seems to be, it's confusing for a lot of people, including our staff and board members and new board members. We went through a budget 101 session with new board members on Friday, and they had a lot of great questions, which I think I did a terrible job answering. And so over the weekend, I've put together a graph. That's my attempt to do the best job I can on explaining not so much the details of the PCAA, since I think most people are aware, but how it impacts our revenues and our rates. And so I'm gonna walk through you guys just this graph, which hopefully sets the stage for the headwinds that we're facing in 27 and will add a little more color to the situation facing us. So this is an illustrative impact of the PCIA. The numbers are not exact, but they're ballpark enough, but don't get too hung up on the exact dollars and cents. I'm looking at 2 years. So first we'll take the current year, 2025 that we're in. These are approximate numbers. Again, don't focus too much on the exact, but if you're a PG&E customer, either you opted out of our service or maybe you never opted out in, you're paying about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. Again, that's not an exact number, but let's just use it for illustrative purposes. As you all know, our goal is to provide as much of a discount as we can for our customers. Right now, we're at a 10% discount. It doesn't have to be, but that's what our target is for 2025 right now. So we are targeting to charge our customers 14.4 cents per kilowatt hour. PCIA, which our customers pay to PG&E for departing, is currently, it's a little less than this, but again, I'm using round numbers, about 1 cent per kilowatt hour that our customers pay. As a result, for our customers to pay a 10% discount, we would charge them 13.4 cents. 13.4 plus 1 cent gets us to the 14.4 cents. That's a 10% discount to PG&E customers. So that's where we are today. Say again, the numbers are not exact, but more importantly is I want to sort of explain potential changes next year. If in next year on January 1st, when PG&E adjusts their rates, we think their rates are going to go down. Cost of energy is a lot lower, which is great for their customers, for all customers. And let's just say for argument's sake, it goes down 2 cents from 16 cents to 14 cents. And I'll caveat, this is just the generation portion. T&D is probably going way up, so customers may not see all this, but on the generation portion, we do expect generation rates to come down for customers. We still want to offer our customers, ideally, a 10% discount. It doesn't have to be 10%, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but let's just use for argument's sake 10%. That would result in a rate to our customers total of 12.6%. That's 10% off of the PG&E's rate. We think PCIA is going to go way up next year because of the proposed decision that I just mentioned, calculation adjustments and some market movements. And let's say for argument's sake, it goes up from 1 cent up to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. This is a charge that our customers have to pay PG&E. Revenue doesn't come to us, but it is money out of their pockets. And if we want our customers to pay in total a net 10%, we can only charge them 8.6 cents. 8.6 plus 4 cents gets you to 12.6. So the net result of all this year over year, because of all those changes, is a 35% decrease in the rate that we charge our customers, which is basically a 35% decrease in revenues. And so this is the headwind, the wall that we're anticipating is going to happen. The numbers aren't exact, but they're close enough that we're facing because of this PCIA impact and potential change in PG&E rates, but the PCIA is the one that's really beyond our control. So I just wanted to ground people for this body, giving you all well-tenured board members. You're probably aware of this, but I just thought it'd be helpful to sort of lay the groundwork. Please.
That graph is really helpful.
Oh, good.
Mhm. Isn't it
Very,
good?
very, very helpful.
Oh, good.
Post that on our website.
Okay.
To
I have a
explain.
question.
Yes,
Sure.
please.
So this doesn't go on to 2027. And clearly, there's a prediction for 2027,
Mhm.
which looks like it continues this process. Those numbers are pretty important.
So the situation, it's a little, we change our rates. Our fiscal year is different than this is calendar year. PG&E rates change their rates on January 1st. So we are expecting, again, approximate numbers, this will happen on January 1st. So that impacts the second half of our fiscal year 26 and then all of fiscal year 27. Does that make sense? So it's
It's that right-hand column scenario through the following
Wait,
fiscal.
it's the second, the What's 26 would be
second half of fiscal year 26
Six,
and the first half of fiscal year
27.
27.
but the second half of 27.
We don't expect a big change from these numbers. It's gonna, after that, it starts to move in our favor.
Okay.
And we're guessing, once we go out more than 1 year, it's hard to
Right.
know what PG&E rates are gonna do.
So we've been going out 1 year, we've never been right yet, never.
So this, it's a little hard because I get confused too. It says fiscal 2026 on this page, but it's really impacting most of our fiscal year 27, which you see on the graph I see you printed out. That's what's causing the problems.
I have a question. I know there's proposed legislation regarding PG&E customers shouldn't have to pay for the undergrounding, wildfire risk mitigation, et cetera, regarding, for affordability. Has there ever been talk of legislation that switching over to CCA, people shouldn't be continuously and forever punished for not
There's
getting
Oh,
their
yeah,
energy
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah, yeah.
PG&E?
Tons and tons of lobbying on that.
Okay.
But
And
here's what
just-
happened though, I mean, it was meant to phase out.
Yeah,
That's the entire idea. And then about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a decision made by the commission to allow utility-owned generation to become part of the PCIA calculation, which meant that in effect, it takes it out in perpetuity. So,
it's
Which
just
we
not
were,
right.
which we were talking about earlier this morning of, what industry, this is a publicly held corporate for-profit with shareholders, billion-dollar making entity. What other business, like auto manufacturing, other utilities like phone service, television, et cetera, is held under that restrictive policy? It's really crazy.
If I switched from AT&T to Verizon,
You don't have to continue
AT&T, I wouldn't have to keep,
paying for all
Paying
the
for
poles
that.
that they have up and all the cell towers they have.
once my contract.
Do we in turn have PCE customers who go to PG&E have to pay us? No. Do they have to pay us for PCIA? And why not?
It's a one-way
it's
street.
not enshrined.
It doesn't make
It's not
sense.
enshrined. in
We're
statute.
entering contracts as well.
There are some CCAs that have contemplated an exit fee, not called PCIA, but. And certainly if we had a community leave our service, it is contemplated in our JPA that community would have to pay for any stranded costs associated with leaving our service. So we do if a community leaves wholesale, but we do not do that on an individual customer basis.
Has this come up with CC Power as a discussion that maybe a little legal muscle with? the
Cal CCA?
CPUC? Yes.
We have talked about running legislation. Cause we've been in a defensive posture on this issue for 10 years.
Right.
The time has never been, in fact, Justin Kuda, you may remember, I don't believe Cal CCA has sponsored PCIA legislation. Because it's a little bit of a losing battle for us.
When PCIA first started to apply to us, the Cal CCA led an effort. There were much fewer CCAs at the time, but there was a very serious effort led. And there was an administrative decision that we won, that was very significant
At the commission,
at the commission.
not at the legislature.
And the commission decided not to go with that decision. Rothwade, I think. And so we tried to go to the legislature and LCCA wasn't effective
It was a
and
non-starter.
the legislature wasn't.
Sympathetic.
The IOUs contributed too much money to the legislators. There was no ability to change the decision.
Oh, fly.
Jerry Hill was the last person in the legislature that really took on the IOUs. There's nobody in there now that is replaced Jerry Hill in terms of his perspective and bills that he pushed forward.
Okay, so this was not meant to be a deep dive on PCIA, but I want to just set the groundwork on this recent PD that we got is bad news, and it's gonna have an impact for us next year. So now I'm gonna walk through all of our costs. Just to ground everyone on the page, hopefully it's a somewhat familiar format, but this is our cost of energy, which is our largest by far category of cost. The left column, 2025, is the current year that we're in. We're not done with it yet, so it's 9 months of actuals through March, and then the last 3 months of forecast. 2026 is obviously the budget that we're talking about, that we're asking the board to approve. And then we've got the variance both in dollars, absolute dollars, and then a percent change. The punchline here is great news. Cost of energy, we are forecasting to decrease by about 8%, $29 million. There's a lot of ups and downs, as you can see, the variances. The biggest driver by far is capacity, the cost of resource adequacy. The prices have declined significantly. That's impacting the PCIA. So it's a good news, bad news, but the good news is we are paying a lot less for RA. We were paying about $33 on average this current year. We are forecasting that to go down to $12. That's a $61 million reduction in cost for us. There's some other ups and downs here. You can see the cost of REC and GHG free, we're expecting to also go down, both the absolute prices. We're now receiving the nuclear allocation for free from Diablo. And then we've gotten more PPAs signed, and those come with REC, so we don't have to go out and buy them. The offsetting decreases, there are some positives here, is just energy. That's due partially to increased load and the just cost of energy increasing slightly. And then you can see here contingency increasing from $5 million to $30 million. I just want to, that's a little confusing. The reason that there's contingency left in 2025 is that's the remaining 1/4 of contingency that's not actual yet. When we started the year, we had north of 25 million, I think, of contingency. We haven't had to use it, but in the remaining forecast, we still kept it in there. For next year, we are budgeting a 10% contingency, which is what the board gave guidance on or policy on a couple years ago, and so that's what we've assumed in the budget. Hopefully, we don't have to spend that, and then this number will get even better, decrease. But right now, it's a decrease of about $29 million year over year.
Can you explain contingency? It is confusing. What is?
Contingency is, well, it's right now, it's just a mathematical
So
equation.
it's just a number in case we made a mistake?
Yeah, remember, where this comes from
That
is,
seems huge.
where this came from was out of the surplus fund committee work. When we were allocating those surplus funds, but it was clear, and at the time, there was a very specific example of an extra unanticipated $30 million we had to spend in RA to
right.
remain compliant. And we didn't have it in the budget. And it was just that volatility. So at the time, the board said, not policy, but directed, that we should set aside up to 10% as a contingency to absorb the volatility. Last year, I think we brought it down to around 7%. It doesn't have to be that high, but that's just so you know, that's the why, that's where it comes from.
But what is it?
It's
It's
just-
just in case we make a mistake?
Not mistake, energy
The market
markets
changes.
are incredibly volatile, and so.
It involves the hedging if we mistake or
Not
if
really
we didn't. What reality is, if we don't have the coverage and the market spikes, we put aside money to be able to cover that.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah,
Well, that's
Exactly
like
what
the
it's
state
for.
revitalization fund. We're putting money aside.
Yep, that's a different
That's
mechanism
different.
though.
this is, I mean, most companies have some sort of uncertainty. You know, we're not guessing, sounds bad. We're estimating the cost of all these products. They could be lower, hopefully knock on wood, but they could also be higher. We do our best job. Roy's team does a great job managing, keeping costs as low as possible, but we are somewhat beholden to the markets. And energy markets are, as we all know, very, very volatile. We do hedge a lot, so we've locked in a lot of these prices, so we are not completely exposed, but there is some uncertainty, and we saw, I guess, a couple of years ago, cost of RA, and you can see here.
It doesn't have to be 10%. It could be something lower than that if this body wants us to look at that.
Yeah,
Speaking of that number, when we compare the other CCA, sorry, is it standard, is it 10, is it 5, is it, I mean,
Well, and this is just covering the quarter that ends in June?
No, well,
Senior.
Because you've got 9-month actuals, so this is addressing the forecast piece.
there's two numbers, so the 30 million, the 30.9 million is a full year, next year's budget, it's just math, it's 10% of 300 million was the cost of energy, is 30 million, so you add that up. The 2025, what's there is we've got 1 quarter left of contingency, so that is 25%
Okay.
of the original contingency
We're
was 20.
amortizing it off.
Yeah, exactly, we're amortizing it off, thank you. And so I don't think we'll have to spend it, we're now 3 weeks away from the end, but that's just the way our we
So we
record
don't-
actuals.
Yeah,
and then
we don't hold the whole $30 million.
Correct.
We sort of, yes,
Release
amortize
it.
that off and release it as we work through the year.
Correct.
And then reset it again at the beginning of the next year.
Correct.
For the board, I think you should just add fiscal year 25 and 26 there,
Okay,
so it
Good point.
doesn't read like it's calendar.
good point, okay, I will make.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Other questions on that contingency, Rick?
We had it last year, it was
Seems like
7%.
funny money.
I mean,
I've
Make a
been on a lot
proposal.
of boards, I've never seen it on a board report, I know we can't estimate anything. So I know that, I mean, I've gone through this every year about how we
I know.
miss the reality.
Right,
And that's, I think, why we have contingency, because we miss the reality, because we're subject to this stupid control by the CPUC and what they do for the IOUs, and that adversely impacts us. I really understand that.
could we check with our other CCAs to see what their standard is it 10, is it 8, is it 5? Just because we also have a reserve, right, so
correct.
we're being extra careful.
Like I said, last year, I think we landed at 7%, so 10 was the board directive or guidance.
Maximum.
Maximum, doesn't have to be that. So we can do some more homework on that and then we'll come back to you if
Yeah.
we can.
I mean, like our city budget we have a huge budgeted reserve, and then we have additional money. I mean, there's layers and layers. We have contingency reserve, we have this reserve. And then I know we have like our retained earnings that get rolled over, so unrestricted budget reserves that just sort of sit in a floating account, which obviously after 2019 have been seriously depleted. But I think it's sort of that type of a situation where, like, we just have, we have emergency contingency, 500,000. We have a sort of formulaic contingency. We have there's a 500, 2 million, and then there's a number that floats, that's like 25 million. And then we have unassigned fund balance after that. And I feel like so we could get rid of all that and just have it all in unassigned fund balance, but I always just feel like it's a really good way to, like, if you pierce your contingency reserve, it's a really strong notification that there's
There could be-
something going
yeah.
on with, the pricing or the markets or our ability to judge what the pricing is gonna be, or we have an excessive amount of exposure that's not hedged properly.
I think that's very well said.
So that's why I like it in there, because it just gives me a sense of where we're going. Whereas if it's just coming in and out of the 300 million, I'm not gonna notice it as much.
But what it does mean is that our final numbers are really different than our estimates.
Yes, they are. And there's not much
And
we can do about
This year it
that.
happens to be in our favor.
Yeah, this
Year
year's our
before that,
favor.
it was to our detriment, because it was a $30 million hit that we had to take in order to remain compliant. I know you were in those
We
conversations.
had 1 year when that happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened to be when the
Yeah,
surplus
yeah,
fund.
yeah.
Yeah, so
And it was
there
like,
is
oh my
like a
God.
The
logic.
rate stabilization fund enabled us to manage that.
Well,
Yeah,
I
Some
think
of
this
it.
also, we had to go back to the board every time, so the idea
Yeah.
was the board said, rather than markets move, we can't control RA, use a 10% contingency, I think it was.
which gives the
joint.
staff the
Yeah,
opportunity to kind of work with it.
The hope is to never have to use it, but it's.
But it wasn't, I don't think it was use a 10% contingency, it was use a maximum of 10%.
Yeah.
And it was a
Uh,
set
I
aside
think
that
it
said
said
10%. It did.
Yeah.
Positive. We don't have to though.
Yeah,
It's a guideline, so
because last year we didn't, or last year
We
we did.
budgeted
Colleen?
for
we
Seven.
haven't had to.
Right,
Colleen?
And
I'm sorry,
I was
distract.
just gonna say, not to get in the weeds, but when we talk about increased PPA, with our contracts, and I think about different ones we've approved over the past couple of years, a lot of them with operational dates of 2026. Have we checked in with those to see where they're at in terms of actually with tariffs and material sourcing, if they're really on schedule, just out of the blue? Because
Yes.
there, as I recall, there were quite a few in 2026.
Yes, now that would not affect necessarily a PCIA discussion, right? So two separate things. Yes, Roy and team do that all day, every day.
She, what, Nellie, he's saying
But
something there, just.
I'm referencing increased PPA generation.
That's specifically to the rec prices, but in general, I mean, I don't know if Roy's on the line, Sean, maybe you can
Yeah.
comment. The PPAs we've signed, I think they have a lot of protection. The historical ones on cost increases.
Oh, definitely, yeah, we have not had to open existing signed contracts to renegotiate on price. What we have had to deal with is delay,
That's
commercial
what-
operation
that's what I'm
delay,
asking.
and we collect delay damages, which shows up on the bill
Oh, okay.
on our budget, which Nick will talk about.
Okay.
But that in and of itself does not affect the PCIA calculation, two separate things.
The PPAs we are negotiating right now, which potentially have additional costs because of ITC or lack thereof or tariffs, that could impact our costs, but out years like 28, 29.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on from cost of energy, this is our largest.
There was a
Oh,
comment.
sorry, yeah, sorry, please.
Yes, Justin?
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna speak to contingency, and kind of what the most classical example is of it is a heat wave. So if a heat wave occurs, you have a surge in people's energy usage. They may use more electricity than we have contracted for, and that leaves us in a position, along with most of the state, of buying energy, and it also drives up the price. So that's kind of the most common way that a CCA triggers contingency, is the additional cost of buying energy during a weather event like that. Because we've had such temperate weather over the last couple of years, that's why a lot of times these contingencies haven't been triggered. But I can tell you that the last several years before that, these contingencies were being triggered every year for most CCAs.
It was during drought years, right? September of 2022 being the most recent.
Right.
Thank you, Justin.
Some heat waves and also some gas pricing events.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before we leave this page, would you like us to go back and do a little bit of benchmarking on the percentage of the contingency and maybe come back with
We can.
something lower?
Well, I think it would be helpful to really take a serious look at it and see if you judge that you need the 10%. So consider it a maximum of 10% rather than a set of 10%. But I think what Justin just said is very helpful, because I think, in fact, we know weather is out of our control. And if we have a major heat wave, we're gonna have increased load, and we're not gonna have contracted for that, so we're gonna have to buy that on the market, which our contingency would cover. So I think his comment was very helpful. And I think if you guys would review it.
Sure.
I don't wanna be fixed at 10%. I think that's not the right answer. I think having a maximum of 10% makes sense, as long as you're doing the review to make a judgment, which I know you
Yeah,
are.
and we talked about, I'm comfortable, it's not gonna change the net result, but reducing it from 10%, we kind of talked about it, it's not gonna change this conversation.
Yeah,
So we can-
we will
we
come
can
back
to
to
the
you.
board.
Well, but it is gonna change our next conversation. If that number were less, then our cost of energy would be less,
Correct.
and that's gonna change our next conversation.
About rate stabilization. It's fine. Keep going, my friend.
Is it possible to reassess the 10% on a quarterly basis?
So we will do a budget refresh in January, we'll have at that point, say 5 months of actual, and so we'll know at that point, have we used the contingency?
Yeah.
And so at least we can release, if we haven't used
Yeah,
it, we'll
we
release the
release
first.
it.
But you'll have a spike though during the heat wave. That's when it happens.
Yeah,
And so releasing it like earlier in the year is not gonna do us any good, because now you're gonna be short of it. So keeping it there to cover the price increase when the heat wave hits. That's what we need the money.
So
for.
the amortized releasing is basically like reassessing in a way.
Yeah.
It accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always 10%, right, relative to that quarter.
Right, so as you.
So, and there really, it's not, all this is a budget, it's just sort of, throws, like, we do our best to stick numbers up there that are gonna be good. So readjusting it every single time, every single quarter would mean rebalancing and resetting up the whole budget and getting a whole new approval for the budget. So that's not really feasible.
We would do that mid-year.
We would do it mid-year, which is normal, but it also, you have to remember, it's always 10%. If you look at the relativeness of as we sort of go through the budget, we're always at 10% now. I think if we got to the very last quarter and we had 5.6 million and we needed to spend 10 during a heat wave, say, it's not like we would be over our 30% contingency. I think it would just read in, it would give us a sense that we had a spike in that one quarter. Again, that's to me, the understanding of what's going on. If we just carry the whole for 30 million throughout the year and then we reset, we wouldn't capture necessarily the matched spike. So to me, this is like the contingency is like a red flag situation. If we breach through it, then what is going on that we need to look at?
But I think that I don't think a quarter versus 6 months is the magic. I think doing it at mid-year is fine.
Yeah.
But I do think that the problem is in August and September. So once we're past August and September,
We should.
our need is less. So 5.6 million, I don't know if we used some of that already this quarter. 5.6 million for the remainder of this quarter isn't gonna get used, or all of it
Yeah.
absolutely isn't gonna get used. We're not gonna have an enormous heat wave in the next 2 weeks. The problem is August and September.
We might.
So friends, just so we can move along here. I think the feedback, we've taken the feedback. We're gonna do some benchmarking. We will come back to you we'll check in with Roy. Cause we work with him on the forecasting and come back to you with something that is probably south of 10% and north of 5%.
Fine.
That's my guess. All right? Cool.
We've raised the issue.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions before we move on? I will caveat or mention, this is 90% of our budget, so the other numbers are gonna be small compared, so it's great that we're having this discussion, but. Okay, the next largest bucket of costs is programs. This is department led by Raphael. You're all well aware of the various menu of programs that we run, from home electrification to electric vehicles, charging to distributed energy resources. And then recently with the surplus fund, the grants that we give out to member agencies. Here we are seeing or forecasting an increase in programs budget of about $4 million. That is largely or entirely funding buildings, which is our home upgrade, which we are basically launching right now, I believe, or about to launch. We've soft launched it, so it's out there. We are planning to significantly increase our marketing and communication efforts, and we are expecting a big jump in cost. You can see from 6.5 million up to over $13 million. The rest of the cost categories, there's some ups and downs. The one that jumps out is the grants decrease. The reason for that is the member agency grants are basically rolling off, or not rolling off. We basically doled out that money. There are 7 outstanding agencies that we will be funding over the next few years, which is why the remaining 2 million this year, and then there's some allocated next year. But that is a normal expected decrease there. But net about $4 million increase. We'd love to spend more, if there's a lot of demand. But this is what we think is a reasonable expectation of funds that will be distributed next year.
Questions? All right.
Okay, programs is the one area where we do have capital expenses. So these are sort of longer term funds that are deployed, which often have a return of capital, so that money that could come back to us. So the top box is the capital that programs spend, which is actually at this point larger than the expenses. The biggest bucket here is GovPV. So we're all, I'm sure, aware of what GovPV is. We've rolled out GovPV 1. last year, which is most of that $12 million, and then GovPV2, which includes GovPV2, plus we're putting batteries on a lot of the GovPV1 program, so that's the $20 million there, and that is largely driving the increase year over year of about $10.5 million. I will note that GovPV3 is not in this forecast or the full 5-year forecast. There's a lot of uncertainty there with the ITC. There's also uncertainty on if we are gonna finance that on our balance sheet. We will be accessing third-party capital for that, so that is not even in these numbers. Any question? The other box on the bottom is revenue. These are funds that come back to us, largely, a lot of it related to the capital that's deployed. You can see GovPV, this is we enter into PPAs with our member agencies, we put the solar on the roof, and that is the funds that start to come back. It happens over 20 years. So it's small at first, but hopefully increasing. On-bill financing, these are, often 0% loans that we give our customers to install electrification equipment. So that's the repayment of the loan. And then there's some reimbursements we get from the CPUC and then the park. So there's some other cats and dogs, which Sean doesn't like me using, but adds up to a small number, but that's the revenue there.
It's just a little random.
Yeah, I don't know why, it's the term that I'm used to using.
So wait, can you go back?
Yeah, please, sure.
So on the top line, which I guess is the capital expense, are these loans or are they purchasing some asset?
Both. The first line, GovPV, is actually purchasing the solar equipment. So we are going out and buying panels and paying an EPC to put it on all of your buildings. And so those are assets that we actually own now. So we are, for the first time, we are asset owners. Not big numbers, but that's capital. The on-bill financing is loans that we give customers. So we're deploying the capital and they pay it back over, I think it's 7 years.
And in general, on the assets, the biggest number is obviously GovPV in the top group.
Yeah.
And of those assets, then the government agencies are paying us back on a whatever monthly basis as
Yes.
they get the electricity. Is the number, the 20 million number is showing full deployment of the GovPV program?
That is, yes, that is, I believe, the full number for GovPV2. Not
For
the third.
GovPV2, and is under the revenue, is the 400,000 the full number, or is that not assuming?
That
it's
is the
fully-
full number, but a lot of these systems will get built throughout the year. So, and Raphael's on the phone, so he can chime in on the timing. But some of these systems won't be online till maybe the later part of the fiscal year, so there's no revenues.
So, but the 20 million counts for all of the assets, all of the
Correct.
panels and the other physical assets included. Whereas the 400,000 doesn't represent the full monthly payback because it's not a full year's.
Fully,
worth. Is that
exactly,
correct?
yeah. Correct. Raphael, did I describe that correctly? I know you're online. Can you?
Yeah, so the 400,000 reflects GovPV1, the 12 systems that are online, and the expected revenues associated with GovPV1. None of the GovPV2 sites, which will be built over the course of this fiscal year, are reflected in that revenue.
But all of those GovPV2 sites are reflected in the capital cost?
That's correct, because all the construction is happening now. So the construction takes effect over more or less the span of a year to a year and a half. And then after the systems are built and interconnected by PG&E, then the revenues will begin.
So we should be expecting in years to come that GovPV
Yeah.
will stay
Yes.
steady and add on and increase with every
System.
new
You
system
don't
that's added.
have this slide for 2027.
not the slide, we have the numbers in the forecast, but I didn't go at this, we're just asking the board to approve 1-year budget, so it's in the 5-year forecast, the
Mhm.
capital.
Which is coming.
Yeah. GovPV2's first year revenues will be approximately $1.5 million.
So. Yeah, bigger fights.
Any questions?
So I have one question, this is probably better taken offline, but the Menlo Park, the CEC grant, we're assuming that we're only gonna be using about half of it then?
Raphael?
Raphael,
It's that the realization of it, some of it has been coming in this fiscal year, and then some of it would be in the next fiscal year.
But so far, this is only reflecting half of the grant as opposed to the full grant, which is,
Oh,
can
it's
talk
only,
offline.
at this point, we have only reflected in the budget what has been contracted, which is
Got
the
it.
$2 million.
but we're hoping that we will have the other half going through.
Yeah.
And we're trying to extend the timeline. Is my- That's what we should talk offline.
So we talked Friday and basically we're gonna, Raphael and team will set up a Zoom meeting about this because we've got to figure out what to do about it.
Perfect.
It's not, unfortunately, it's not a straight line on this one.
It's very good thing.
It never is. Okay,
We can't give away full.
I
any
know.
any more questions
Ready?
on programs, capital or revenue? I mean, capital is becoming a bigger and bigger portion. I mean, I think before I got here, there wasn't even this page in the budget, so now it's
Yeah, there's money.
larger than the expenses.
The slide was it the previous slide you had where you showed buildings? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's not capital?
no. That's paying, I mean, I guess it is technically capital, but it's not recorded that way. It's paying and giving incentives people to put in home, water heaters or electrifying their homes. We don't get any money back.
So let me just add
Yeah.
one thing, and that's just, thank you to staff for all you're doing with Menlo Park and in general for all these
We'll figure it
programs.
out. It's just,
Yeah.
we have to,
I just didn't want it to sound negative.
No worries.
It's wonderful.
it's all good.
Thank you.
We'll get it.
Good problem there.
Okay, the other cost categories, there are a lot of numbers on here, but again, the numbers are smaller compared to definitely cost of energy and programs. These are basically the cost to run the agency. Compensation is just what that is, that's salary plus benefits. We are expecting an increase due to salary increases and 5 additional headcount next year. The data manager, that's the Calpine fee we pay, service fees, that's the fee we pay to PG&E to do all the billing. Both those numbers are largely flat, which is great. We are expecting an increase in a bunch of the other categories, consultants, legal, marketing. Consultants and legal are largely driven by power resources. Battery optimization is a great example. We are entering into a lot more PPAs with batteries. There's consulting support we need for that. Using CC power, there's some increase there. What else? Communication and noticing, we are expecting an increase in marketing to support the home upgrade. So to spend the program's dollars, we need to get the word out. And so that costs money. It's a small compared to the other categories, but that's sort of what's driving that. And then G&A, that's kind of a catch-all for everything else. That includes, the biggest driver there is software technology costs. We are increasingly using more and more software. So that is what's driving a lot of that $750,000 increase. But there's some other things in there as well. We added $100,000 customer emergency fund, which we haven't had in the past. Subscription costs, there is things like rent, which is not increasing, at least this current year, travel and the like. So a lot makes up these numbers. They're increasing, but pale in comparison to some of the other categories.
What is a customer emergency fund?
That is 150,000, right?
100K we decided.
100,000 set aside for customers who are having trouble paying their bill. And I believe is this a renter's? I'm gonna need to find out more about that. It's essentially to help underserved customers who are at risk of being dropped out of service. To help them over the hump with the expectation that they would repay that back. But before we come to the board, we will make sure we're clearly defined on that, unless you have more.
No, I think it's a
information.
placeholder. I mean, I think it was an idea that I know Leslie, we've had in the past. I believe we've had a customer emergency fund in the past, and that she's hearing more and more customers, given the focus on affordability, who are having trouble paying their bills and opportunity to support them.
Sounds good.
It's there so that we can avoid a return of customer to PG&E per policy. So, but we'll get more for the board.
I have no problem with that. It's just that.
I think we'll get that question though, so it's good to be crisp about it.
I think, yeah, it sounds fantastic, and, you know, there might be feedback from the board to, that they would want to up that, just a guess.
Good follow-up, thank you.
Okay.
One thing to note, in this coming fiscal year, we do not have money in the budget for new office facilities. As we have discussed, we think that's coming, probably, likely. But we don't have it in this fiscal year because we will begin paying rent on a new place in the next fiscal year. But any kind of tenant improvements, that would potentially come out of this fiscal year, right?
It would, but hopefully we don't have to do that.
Oh, do all of them have tenant improvements included?
Some of them fully funded, hopefully the ones we choose, we may have to be out of pocket a
Okay.
little bit, so there's nothing in there now, because we just don't know which
But
place
the
we're gonna
one,
choose.
the top four, I think, are all, no, 3 out of the 4
3 out of the 4
have tenant improvements included, right?
They all have some amount, some
Right.
are saying, we'll give you a turnkey office, no capital spent. The
Where-
520, I think, said we'll pay half, basically.
Yeah, 520 will pay half. I think notably 1300 El Camino also will pay a portion. I don't believe it's fully funded
So
either.
it's just a flag.
Yeah.
For you to know, it's not in here, and it might be something that we talk about offline if necessary.
Okay.
Most of it will really be realized in the next fiscal year.
Yep. Okay, so those are all the costs. Now we need to move into revenues, and as you all know, we follow cost of service rate making, something we adopted last year. Where we basically set rates to make sure that we have enough revenues to cover our costs. So if you add up all those costs that I just went through, trust me, it adds up to $394.4 million. There are some offsets, non-electricity sales, which is the program's revenue that comes back, and then we get some earns interest on our cash balance. So net costs are $376 million next year, at least that's what's budgeted. If we were to collect enough revenue to cover those costs, that's about, I use squiggly line, $380 million that needs to be collected next year through rates. There's many different ways we could set rates to cover that. We right now follow PG&E's rate cost allocation approach. And so if we were to set our rates at a 10% discount to PG&E's over the entire year, we believe that we will collect enough revenue, about $380 million, to cover our cost. And so as a result, our recommendation to this committee as well as the full board will be, or is, to basically maintain rates at the current 10% discount that they're at today throughout the fiscal year. I will caveat that we're expecting PG&E rates to decrease in January and the PCIA to increase. Remember, that's that graph I went through. And so we expect that to result in about a 35% decrease in our rates if we want to maintain that 10% discounts. That's good news. That's what we think we can afford. But we will come back to we're not making a decision today, but we'll come back to the board in January with that budget refresh. We'll know exactly what PG&E's rates are and what the PCIA is. And we'll come up with that exact number. But in the forecast right now is a 35% rate decrease starting in February of next year. Yes.
Do we know why we anticipate PG&E lowering rates?
I can't probably give a detailed answer, but in general, a lot of the cost of energy have come down. Resource adequacy, the cost of renewable attributes, the overall cost of energy has come down, and their customers are benefiting that, as we are. Remember, our cost of energy has come down, so they're in the same markets as we are.
Good news.
Yeah, this is all hopefully good news. So in summary, this is the budget that we're asking you to recommend to the board to approve, and eventually the board to approve. sorry, there are a lot of numbers on the page. The left column again is the current year and where we think we're gonna end up, which is very strong, very favorable, $60 million change in net position. That's due primarily to a lot of favorability in the cost of energy, which we've talked about in the quarterly results. The two columns on budget maybe are a little less relevant for this committee, but I did want to highlight, we had an initial budget on May 12th, which we shared with the finance committee. And here we are on June 9th, that should be 9th, sorry, that's a typo. June 9th. Most of the cost categories have not changed. The one big change is electricity sales to account for the PCIA assumptions, the PD that I mentioned. And if we want to maintain a 10% discount to PG&E, we are going to have to lower our rates that we charge customers by about $25 million. So that's the main difference between those two columns. The net of the budget that we're asking this board to approve results in a change in net position of about $1 million. I will say that if we adjust the contingency, Rick, that 1 million could be 7 million, slight positive. And that's where you'll see that if we reduce from 10% to say 7%. I will say again, just it says on this page that we will return to the board in January with this budget refresh. We'll have 5 months of actual data at that point, almost 6 months. And at that point, we will know exactly PG&E's rates and the PCIA. And so if things have changed, if any assumptions are different, we will tweak the 35% decrease, but that's what's in these numbers right now.
Rick has a question.
Sorry.
Right?
Okay, so in preparing for this, I looked at the 5-year forecast,
Okay,
which you had distributed.
Yes.
And the thing that totally jumps out at me is that when you compare 25, which is up here, with 27, which isn't yet up here, but it's in the 5-year forecast, our aggregate operating revenues decreased by 33%, about half each year.
Right.
And the combination, well, our operating expenses increased by 37%. So that gives me real serious heartburn, right? I mean, no business that is in control of itself is able to easily manage a revenue decrease over 2 years of 33% and implement a cost increase of 37%. And I know that that's not the cost of energy. But that's we don't have control over the cost of energy. We do have control over what our operating expenses are. So if you guys decide to change the contingency, and I'm not necessarily advocating for that, I'm advocating to look at it.
Yeah, fair.
But if you decide to do that, I know that will have that will improve that comparison. And when I look through the different expenses that we showed up there, I think that, you know, these are all things that we're totally focused on, and we spent a fair amount of time on them. The really big change that happens over this period is the buildings expense, which is the investment we're making in our customers converting from gas appliances to electricity appliances. Principally, that's what the buildings expense is. And I think the new program that Raphael is launching around solar and batteries at the residential level is really important. And there are other, I don't know about CCAs, I think there are other CCAs, but there's other energy companies that I know he's looked really carefully at who are doing really well in that area. And I know there's a big challenge with the PUC around the whole issue of rooftop solar. But that program includes virtual power plants. I think it's really the right thing for us to do. What I think we need to review really carefully is to look at the buildings expense numbers, because we want to make sure 2 things. One, we're not just putting money in a bucket that isn't going to be spent. So I'm not convinced that we're gonna see $20 million worth of people choosing to change. I think, you know, in Atherton, we're very strongly advocating people to make that appliance change. It's really hard. The early adopters, it's not really hard. We're through the early adopters pretty much. It's convincing the mass of consumers to make that change. And we all know that is a cost issue. And electricity isn't cheap. I'm not seeing the people stepping up. So I suspect that we may not be spending all that $20 million. And I want to make sure that if we're not getting actually a return, that we're not spending that money. That's what I really want to make sure about. I want to make sure we're not being inefficient. And I've been in plenty of companies where there was inefficiency because there were expenses committed to that were then just followed through on, even though they didn't generate the expected benefit. And it may be that we should, given this data, this really motivates looking at it because our revenue is going to go down by 33% based on our projection. And I know our projections are always wrong, but this is as reasonable as you can get, so we have to rely on it. And to look at our costs going up 37% gives me real heartburn. That's my comment.
We will, in the next section, talk about the 5-year forecast, so I want to make sure, I mean, I can go to it now, but I think it's also good to talk about the rate stabilization. Yeah,
That's fine.
because it's a tool we have to manage some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think focusing on the budget is the right thing. We need to approve a budget and we need to recommend a budget. That's just where you saw the numbers.
you're right.
Because 27 continues the transition, both in terms of reduced revenue and increased expense.
Yeah.
Whereas when you go to 28, it changes.
Right, and the reason I put together that PCIA graph was just for the, I mean, I wanted to highlight, we are expecting revenues to come down exactly as you said, over 30% over the next 2 years from current, which is scary. We see it jumping back up because we think it's a one-time.
Well, we did project that before and we did have an impact before, but it wasn't as great as we thought it would be because.
Yeah, no, I agree,
I mean, it feeds right into the next discussion.
Yeah.
So.
Will we have revenues, maybe not a lot, but for the people who will pay for the PCE consulting for the home upgrade?
I don't think we included that.
Raphael, are you on the line?
He is.
Where is Raphael?
He's on the lower right there, I see him.
I don't know why he's not here. I don't think so, to be honest with you. If we do, it's quite de minimis.
Yeah, okay.
But he could speak more granular.
I'm sorry, I am here. Apologies, I'm in the airport. But our expenses in programs are overwhelmingly volumetric. So if we don't have uptake in a given program, then we will not see those expenses.
Sorry, Raphael, Leslie's question was on the consulting. I don't think, we haven't assumed any revenue for that program on the home upgrade is that what, consulting?
No, there's no associated revenue with home upgrade. That's correct.
But it is something people would pay for?
So Raphael, you'll have to explain, if you don't mind, really quickly. I know it's a tiered program in terms of tiered support. But is there a scenario that we have where the customer is actually paying PCE for our help?
So if a customer is an income qualified customer, then PCE covers all the costs. If they're a market rate customer, then they do have to pay for the balance of costs after the incentives. And so from that standpoint, Franklin, our administrator, does collect funds from the customer, but they do not flow through PCE.
Flows to the contractor.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Leslie. Thanks, Raphael.
So I think we're looking for a vote action to recommend to the board approval of the budget with, I don't know how it works, Sean, with, I mean, I think the only, I think feedback I heard was the contingency, which I'm completely open to looking at, and I think
Yeah.
it may make sense. It's not gonna change, I think, the punchline, the net result, but we can adjust that.
Contingency, and then for information, just making sure we understand that $100,000 emergency fund. Making sure we take a very clear look at the building's expense in the out years.
Well, it first impacts the budget in 26, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's an increase of more than $4 million year to year,
Yeah.
25 to
In
26.
the buildings.
Let's just really quick take public comment, if anyone has any. I don't think I see anyone. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I will move to recommend to the board that we adopt the budget as shown, with the understanding that a few of the items that Sean just summarized will be looked at.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, on
Okay.
to the next item.
Next topic, very much related, is the 5-year forecast and the rate stabilization fund. Before we get into the rate stabilization fund, here are a bunch of numbers. This is the 5-year forecast without the impact of the rate stabilization fund. Sorry, the numbers are so small. We follow in this scenario what I call cost of service rate making. So I am setting revenues in the forecast years to be sufficient to cover our costs. This is gonna be a little bit different, Rick, from the page you're looking at, which I'll get to in a second. I'm sort of taking us on the journey. So if we were to set revenues to cover our costs, and you can see I'm sort of solving for a change in that position of basically $1, $2, $3 million, sort of a small positive change in that position, small profit. If we were to do this, you can see the challenge in 2027, our rates would be at a 22% premium to PG&E. That's because of, remember that first graph, the PCIA and PG&E rate changes. That's obviously non-starter. That's not gonna work. And so thankfully, we have the rate stabilization fund, which is a great accounting tool to be able to hopefully manage this sort of 1-year blip in fiscal year 27. Before I get into that, I want to just remind everyone what the rate stabilization fund is, since it's been about a year since we've talked about it. And it's kind of a unique, esoteric conversation. So just as a reminder, the board approved the establishment of the rate stabilization fund about a year ago, last May, and essentially allows us to defer revenues in years when results are really strong, like last year and maybe even this year, to be used in future years, i.e. fiscal year 27, when to help us quote, quote, stabilize, which is where you get the name, or potentially supplement rates. The direction from the board at the time was that we would consider deferring revenues into the fund when addition to net position was positive 3%, so greater than 3% of revenues. And the other directive was that deposits could be made into the fund up until when the balance was 15% of revenue. As a result, last year we did defer for the first time 68 million of revenues into the fund, and that represented the 15% of revenue. Just as a data point, just to give us comfort, almost all of our peers have similarly established a rate stabilization fund. It's a great accounting tool that they've availed themselves to. And I've listed all the CCAs. Silicon Valley is one of our only peers that doesn't have one, but I've talked to their CFO and they are definitely planning to defer a lot of revenues this year and implement a fund. As far as benchmarking data, the percentage of revenues ranges from a low of 9% to a high of 20%, which happens to be Sonoma. So we're at 15% today. But I will mention that in my conversations with my peers, they're all in the same situation that we're in. They're all seeing this cliff, this challenge in 27, and they're also dealing with a really strong year this current year. And so they're all planning to increase their deferral. And so while I can't guarantee it, I'm highly expecting these numbers to increase from benchmarking data. So that's just a quick reminder on the fund. For fiscal year 27, if we did want to be able to provide our customers a discount of say 5%, that's just a placeholder, we would need about $105 million of deferred revenue from the rate stabilization fund. Unfortunately, We only have $68 million in there today from last year. As a result, we are recommending a temporary waiver of that fund limit of 15%, which will allow us to defer revenues this current year, which, as you saw, are very strong, about positive $60 million. The exact amount will depend on how the results turn out at the end of the year. We still have a couple months or a month left. But as a data point, if we were to defer $37 million, which gets us to that $105 million, that would represent about 23% of revenues, which does exceed that limit of 15%. And you can see the graph here. It's not a very fancy graph, but currently, if we were to not use the fund, we would have to be at a 22% premium. Once we use the fund, we can stabilize rates, and you can see that nice flat 5% in the out years. So this gets us to the page that I did send around. This is the 5-year forecast with the rate stabilization fund. The only change is the circles. So I have us deferring $37 million in the current year, amount exactly to be determined. So we're still at a positive change in net position of 23 or so million dollars. And then if we were to recognize that full 105 million in 2027, which would allow us to only have to collect 300 million of revenues, Rick, which that's that 30+% decrease. We are magically able to offer our customers a 5% discount, which I've circled at the bottom. All the other numbers on the page are the same. And so that is our proposal. That's what we would like to do. We think it makes a lot of sense and allows us to offer that discount to customers without showing a loss on our income statement.
Questions? Okay. The one thing that came up in the meeting before this was, I just want to talk a little bit about the, if we don't have a rate stabilization fund and we have a big loss like that, oftentimes the rating agencies want us to up our rates. Like, they don't care how much money is in our reserve account. So it sounds strange because it's sort of an accounting illusion, right? We're just moving money into this bucket and moving back into that. And we could just cover it out of reserves, if you will, but it's having a mechanism in place to officially sort of manage that seems to be something they're very happy about. And I don't want to be in a position where we are feeling compelled to somehow raise our rates.
Well, we're definitely gonna be raising our rates in 27.
Well, we might raise our rates, but I don't want to raise them. I want to keep the discount relative, right? In other
Well, the
words,
discount's gonna go down from 10 to 5%.
that's
which I
fine, but we
think
still
is
have,
right, but we still have a
That's-
discount.
right.
It's still a discount.
But But what we don't want to have is someone's just looking at the income, the financials without looking at the balance sheet. They're not going to understand maybe that we have all this money on our balance sheet. So this is our mechanism by which if someone were just looking at our income statement or, and understanding this big negative loss, that they would then want us to raise rates, even if we have a reserve.
The other thing I didn't mention at the finance committee, so I forgot, but we're not definitely doing this, so don't get alarmed, but we are talking to third-party financiers about potentially accessing capital for GovPV3, since the dollars get a lot bigger. If that would be the case, there would be covenants where we couldn't show a negative change in that position, or else we'd have to raise rates. So in addition to the rating agencies, I'm not saying we're gonna go down that path, that's another reason to ideally utilize this accounting mechanism to smooth out our earnings.
But I don't understand, so this is GovPV3, we'd be talking to.
Like the California infrastructure.
The iBank, maybe even an actual third-party capital issuing bonds. It's just
About creating a bond,
correct, or bank, a loan or a bond.
and are we thinking about doing another prepaid deal? Because
That's totally different.
no, I know it's totally different, but it generates
Yes.
revenue.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are thinking of another prepay.
If the market improves.
I understand that's a
And-
market driven deal.
But I also really want to say, this whole discussion of any third party.
Yeah, I don't want to, I probably
lending
shouldn't
is
have said
way
it.
premature.
No, it should.
Way premature, because I also think that we have to see the outcome of the big bad
ITC.
bill. And what this is doing to the ITC, because that directly impacts the economics of GovPV. So hold on that, please.
Yeah, sorry.
So just a clarity to what Donna said, our rate stabilization fund is a deferral of revenue. It's not technically an increase in reserves, right?
No, just a deferral of
It's a
revenue.
deferral of
No
revenue.
impact on
It's-
cash.
It's and the other, did we sort of lead the CCAs in doing this?
No. No.
Okay,
Middle of the pack.
Middle of the pack, yeah.
okay.
There were a few, I mean, when we did this conversation last year, we were at some benchmarking, some peers, but now when I look at it, the floodgates have
more now.
opened.
Everybody's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Well, because now this thing that's coming in 27 or 28, everybody's seeing the same models, the same forecasts. So Silicon Valley and others are looking to now implement that.
So I get it, we're gonna go forward with increasing the amount of money in our rate stabilization fund. And then for the following years, are we're spending a certain portion of that every year to cover that, or that's just for 1 year?
1 year, so
Okay.
we deferred 68 last year, it's not on this page. We're recommending deferring another TBD, but say 37. That'll all then be recognized at 27 when we have this cliff for.
To fill in that cliff, but so,
After that, there's no uses, sorry.
there's
Just
no
wanna
rate
make sure.
stabilization
Well,
fund like.
We have to
Yeah.
read it up.
Yeah.
If
So
we
we'd have to read, yeah.
There's nothing in it, but there's gonna be change,
Continue.
we know
I
that.
totally understand that, because anytime I look forward or past the first year, it's like, that's just super guessing, so. I'm fine with it, I understand it. And 29 and 30, that's like, could be 20 years from now, who knows? But thank you for bringing up that third party, because the sooner that you're thinking about it, it can help us think about it and that transparency, and here we are talking about it. It may be a little confusing, but I think it's very helpful for transparency, so thank you.
100%.
So I'm gonna take comments from the public if anyone has one on this. We have Justin too. Justin has a comment.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out with this chart here too is one of the issues that we're really dealing with is this PCIA charge going up so much. And not to get into that too much, but part of that whole process with the commission is they're allowing next year to retroactively collect costs that they feel should have been hired this year due to the calculation. What that ends up doing is it's really pushing costs that we should have had to deal with in 2025 into fiscal year 25-26 and even into fiscal year 26-27. So by putting this into the rate stabilization fund and then recognizing that revenue in future years, that's enabling us to keep rates stable for our customers and to align these costs with the years they should be in.
Where we need it. Yep. Thank you, Justin.
So I
Okay.
think this is really well stated. It's obviously really important. I think that everything you've got up there is right. Increasing the rate stabilization by 37 million, decreasing the projected discount to 5%. This is all the right thing. I'll make a motion that we approve it.
Thank you, Rick.
Second.
We have a motion by DeGolia, second by Medina. All in favor?
Aye.
Rick, thank you. Yeah?
Right, this
Not even
I-
really approving.
Oh, there's
Oh.
no,
There's no.
there's no
motion needed
approval,
here.
but,
But hey, we
okay,
got it.
okay, sorry, that's okay. Well, we
You
have
guys
an
moved
approval.
quick.
But
Rick,
it's.
it's
but-
okay.
But
It's-
maybe we should.
I mean,
I
there-
think
Don't
we
you
will
want
acknowledge
executive
that.
board?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's totally
It
fine.
probably
There's-
should have been an action item in the agenda, it's discussion, but I think it's great
So-
that we
so
have
the-
unanimous and we will.
So
put that
here's
forward.
here's the way we're gonna look at it.
Consensus.
It's not
Unanimous
necessarily an
consensus.
approval and a recommendation. It's exactly what Leslie says. We have
Guidance.
100% buy-in on the consensus on the way in which this is moving as articulated by Director DeGolia.
Jennifer has some hand up, right?
Hi, Jennifer.
Trustee legal.
Oh, I was just waving my hand to indicate that this was not a voting item, but you all
Yeah.
handled it beautifully, so
Yeah,
we're good.
yeah, we're good. We had the same discussion this morning. Okay.
Before, I just do want to thank Nick and Haley.
Yeah.
Really,
Yes, thank you,
Haley.
Haley.
Haley is the engine behind all of this. Nick's child is graduating, so he's gonna scoot out
Yeah, he's gotta get to a
Congratulations.
graduation
Congratulations.
today.
And I'll catch you later.
Congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you, sorry.
All right. Okay, let's go with
Thank you first.
our final discussion regarding general counsel services at PCE, led by Sean.
Yes, okay,
And-
next.
We just need to take a little pause here. I believe Jennifer Stalzer has a comment.
Jennifer, please.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm going to go ahead and recuse myself for just clarity of conversation on this item, and then I will rejoin, and I'm sure we'll be in good hands in terms of the Brown Act in my absence.
Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Thank you, Jen. Shalini Swaroop, are you on the line? I believe she is. I will invite you to chime in with me if you have anything you want to add. So hopefully all of you received and read the memo, so I'm not gonna rehash all of that. Do you wanna? Are we good here?
Wait,
No,
that's
That's the wrong one.
We right over there.
or Nick left it over there. That's what's going on.
Okay, so, thank you, Brianna. Okay, so the background here is, and I really want to kick off by saying we have had an A+ relationship with the county of San Mateo. Since before we launched, they incubated and supported the development of PCE. We were working with county counsel's office since day one and of having all of our different stakeholder meetings. And it has been nothing but fantastic. So, and it continues to be that way to this day. So we have had a contract with county counsel's office. It has shifted and evolved over time as we've amended that and renewed and refreshed our contract. The history is in the staff memo. The current contract that we're under expires at the end of October this year. As you saw, it definitely increases the number of hours that we have been receiving from county counsel's office now through Jen as our general counsel. Generally at about 50% time. Sometimes it goes up to 60, sometimes little, but right around 50% time increased from, I think it was around 25 to 30%. As the organization has grown, as we noted earlier today, by a lot here in the last 3 years, our programs are more sophisticated. We're looking at layering in potentially more prepay, a number of new vendors that are coming on board. It's just clear to us that we have ever increasing needs. Our average rate, monthly expense this year for general counsel so far has been 25,000 a month. That's representing, as I said, approximately 50% of our general counsel's time. Next, please. See if this will work. Okay, so I've already said, we have matured, we've grown. And so what we're having to do is really appropriately, I think, deepen our legal coverage to make sure that we are not only compliant, but that we are attending to all of the different risks that we have all day, every day. So the clear result here of the last 3 or 4 months that we've had more of Jen's time is that we're quickly going to be moving into a situation where if we move beyond 60% of a general counsel's time, we're now exceeding $300,000 per year, which we've been having this dialogue internally. When we hit that number or somewhere in that 325-ish, now we're getting into the place where we might consider bringing an in-house general counsel, so we have full-time support at generally an equivalent cost to what it is to get part-time support through the county. So what we have contemplated in this year's budget, you might remember, Nick said we've got 5 contemplated new hires this year, one of which could be a general counsel.
This
Well,
year being.
This
the
next fiscal year,
fiscal year.
yeah, sorry, next fiscal year. It would take the money that we have set aside currently in legal/consulting and reallocate it to a full-time person. It wouldn't completely nullify or cancel the contract with the county. I think we would always continue to maintain some smaller level support through the county in case we needed backup or particular assistance. It also does not replace any of the specialized legal contracts we have, especially for power contracting, for regulatory support. for our new innovation strategy, DERMS, et cetera. What it's really doing is saying, how do we want to use the money that we have so far spent for part-time support to the county? And what do we need going forward? So that's kind of the rationale for this discussion today. Going with that, this is not an imperative, but I might as well put it all out on the table. We have an opportunity to potentially change if the executive committee is interested in us pursuing in-house counsel. That reporting line could shift from the board of directors to the CEO. Or it could shift partway, but right now, the way it is contemplated in the JPA says that the board of directors has responsibility for the hiring and firing of the CEO and general counsel. From a practical point of view, the general counsel currently is reporting to me just on a daily operational basis. So when I discussed this actually with the board chair, she recommended, thank you for that, Chair Colson, that there's a couple of options we could look at if executive committee even wants to consider this. One would be don't change it, just keep it as it is. It works fine. It doesn't, option one doesn't reflect current practice, but we could leave it. Option two is amend the JPA, change the reporting line to the CEO, but invite the board officers to participate in the general counsel's performance review. Three would be, the board would retain hiring and firing authority, which is what is currently written in the JPA, hopefully in consultation with the CEO, and remand day-to-day management and annual performance evaluation to the CEO. So that is a very quick flyby of what we've put out there in the memo. And I don't know if
So,
there are
yeah,
others.
so the one thing that my observation that I made, because I think a few people had said something to the effect of, you know, well, this is how we do it at the cities, you know, the cities hire your city manager and you hire a city attorney. But it's my understanding, and you know, maybe other cities do it differently, but the city attorney advises us because we are a legislative body and we make laws. So a lot of the advice we need is got to be to us as the city attorney's client on how we are making laws in our city and kind of the way in which we are putting together resolutions, you know, ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. And that is why it's outside the purview of the city manager. This organization is an operating entity that's a business. And so we are not making laws as a body. We're not a legislative body. We make policy and we work under, you know, and in conjunction with the CEO. So for me, it made a lot of sense to, you know, when we first started this, we hired an independent lawyer with the county. So it was actually, we almost had to hire that first before you hired your CEO, so you could get your contracts and everything in place. And it made a lot of sense, but a decade later now, the actual operations of the business, for all intents and purposes, the legal counsel is part of the C-suite, and they just report up to the city, the CEO. So my personal situation is, you can see how hard it is to even review our CEO. Like adding that layer onto the responsibilities of the board or the executive board, which would be, you know, having to hire, having to conduct their annual review when I'm not working directly with that person every single day, starts to get a little difficult and complex. And from my chair as chair of the board, from my perspective. So that's those are some of the like practical and pragmatic reasons that I was okay with the C-suite folding in under the CEO.
And most of what Jen works on, is contracts now, vendor relationships.
Yeah.
And just these meetings and making sure that we're Brown Act compliant, and
Yeah.
that's really the lion's share.
Yes.
I think your analogy of city attorneys, legislative bodies versus nonprofits essentially. I've never known a nonprofit that didn't have an attorney that didn't report to the CEO. So it's not unusual.
That's a more standardized situation, yeah, or corporate. Usually if you have a corporate board, and Rick, maybe you've seen something different, but what I've seen, the council reports. Now, should there be a problem, for example, the CEO is embezzling, they think, or the CEO is harassing people or something, I would suggest that anyone in the C-suite that was witness to that could contact the board chair. The process would be you would contact us, let us know that there's a problem, and we would then investigate it. If we needed to investigate something and hire an attorney to help us with an investigation, those entities obviously would come and report directly to us. But on the day-to-day operations, I think in terms of governance, this is an actually more standardized way. And there would be allowances for the potential for problems in the future where we would need to hire our own attorney. They would be very specific.
I think this all makes sense, and it definitely makes sense for general counsel to be in-house and that we're not reviewing them as a board, because we would need to be provided with so much information to make that review. I had one question. I screenshot the page because I read on my phone. And there was and I was like, what was my question again? There was talking about like a potential conflict with the board members that are from the county with the general counsel, and I hadn't ever thought about that before, so I didn't know if you could expand on that.
Interesting.
I can comment on that.
Yeah, please.
I want to be careful that I don't think the word conflict is in there. Because we have not.
That's what I was trying to
experienced
that's why I was like
No.
staring at my phone.
But-
I wasn't like texting my
but
friends. I'm
what-
like, what did it
that. We
say?
have had a couple of examples recently
Mhm.
where there was a delay in
Appropriate,
general
it would
counsel.
create
independence.
appropriate independence.
Right.
That's what it says.
So where that really comes from is we've had a couple of examples where there was a delay in a response from the general counsel that we needed in order to run the traps internally to make sure that there was no problem, or you could say conflict, but no problem with any of our other seated board members who also go to that office, who also use that office for their general counsel support. Is it a big deal? No. So that's why I'm saying, like, this second part of this discussion, it's not imperative. We can keep going with what we've done. It's working fine. But I do think it adds, it's just another reason to sort of consider bringing it in-house and separating that relationship.
No, I think that makes sense. And it's something I hadn't thought of before, but it does make sense to have that independence.
And I'd like to hear from everyone, but I'm wondering if it makes sense to sort of think about this in two pieces, which is, first of all, like, is everybody okay with it coming in-house? Everyone's okay with that. So consensus around that?
Hold on.
No,
Yes. You don't want it to be in-house?
I don't know, I think they're two different issues.
Yes,
I
they
think so I
Yeah.
thought that's where you were going,
Oh.
rather than assuming that one of the issues is answered.
So,
I
no,
think
no,
they're two
no.
different issues
They
and
are.
they should be discussed separately.
I think that's what I'm saying, is that there's the in-house, so there's the in-house, do we bring a council in-houses versus continue to use the city attorney? And the county attorney, which is very expensive, and then the second question is, do we want,
To
how do we
change
want the
reporting.
reporting line in the
That's right.
JPA to look like? Did you have a third?
No,
Okay, yeah,
but
those are
I'd
the two.
reverse them.
Okay,
I think, for me, the issue of who the general counsel reports to is an issue the board can decide, and I don't know what, like, I just texted, the executive director of the library board for the county to see, I mean, we use the county as our general counsel, but I don't know if in that structure, the general counsel reports to her or to the board. But I think that for me, it's an easier issue. This is an easier issue because it's just about management.
Mhm.
And currently, Sean is managing the general counsel essentially. I mean, the general counsel really isn't directly reporting to the board. It probably was a little bit more when we started.
Yeah,
Right? And-
definitely.
And David had a more direct relationship with those of us on the board.
Yes.
Because there were, and frankly, at that point, the board was like, we were very involved in negotiating the deal for Wright.
And the
Right, which was our
operations and things, yeah.
first contract, so
Well,
the agency has gotten larger, and to me, that makes sense. I don't have any problem with that at all. The issue about coming in-house versus you continuing to use the county, for me, is a 100% financial issue. If it's gonna be more cost effective for us to bring, especially when we're looking at 2 years of 33% revenue reduction. I don't wanna increase our, I wanna reduce our costs, I don't wanna increase our costs, cause
100%.
so to the extent that bringing counsel in-house would reduce our costs, I'm all for it.
Comment. In the current construct, it would potentially increase our costs by about $50,000. But it would reduce our costs because we need more support. So that's what's happening right now, is that we could really use a full-time general counsel, but if we paid for that on an hourly basis, now you're looking at $450,
Mm-hmm.
$475,
Right,
which
to-
would increase our
The
costs.
confluence of two things, increased demand.
Well, maybe one thing you should do then, I mean, to the extent that there are still items that are gonna be handled by outside counsel, whether that is the county or a law firm, you should change that.
So that Keys and Fox contract, you might recall recently, we
We
had.
just increased, we just
We redid it. What we did with that though, with Jen, with our general counsel, is that we're in the process of looking at all of the legal costs that we have. With Power Resources, we're gonna leave that alone. That is very, very specialized, unfortunately, really expensive. Not in a general counsel's wheelhouse, at least at this
Well, it
time.
depends who we hire.
Yeah. The problem is that public legal support is quite different than commercial support. And it's really important that our general counsel understand Brown Act, all the public law, all municipal law, which is, I don't know, we'll try and find the needle in the haystack, but having that crossover skill set. So that's the rub. And the general counsel that we have is fantastic. So this is not a referendum on that service.
And she
It's
will
just
be
a
applying,
cost issue, and we don't have enough of her time.
and
we
she will
don't.
apply.
Yeah.
That's why she's recusing herself. So
I'm gonna
she
be a
will
little
apply.
careful. Yeah, so that's does that answer your question though, Rick?
Well, if we're gonna increase our cost by $50,000, I think that's a problem. I mean, we're gonna reduce our revenue by $150 million.
Right.
So,
But we're gonna increase our cost regardless of
By-
whether. it's
Yeah,
in
that's
By
house or
50
out
instead
house.
of 150.
Because if we
Right.
expand the contract after October 31, we've basically purchased X amount of time, right? In consultation with the county, this is how much time we were given,
Yes.
right? Because it's not an open time card. She has other clients at the county, right? So what's happening now is that we're still having a backlog of legal
Shalini.
response. Yeah.
Shalini?
Yes, thank you. So many of you know that I was previously the general counsel and chief legal officer for MCE. And when I started at PCE, I began to observe that, when you have an external counsel, you have a very reactive approach to your legal side of your business because you have to constantly go out to that person. There are, as PCE begins to optimize and increase its mature processes, we're really seeing a need for more expansive in-house services for a more proactive approach. And an example of that is we want to implement a contract management software system called Ironclad. Perhaps many of you have used that. Right now, we don't have anyone in-house to be doing that, and we have to pay Jen on a hourly rate to be doing software trainings, for example, or we have to pay Jen an hourly rate to attend certain meetings that would have legal implications. So really it's an expansion of a proactive and approach to managing risk. And it's been a little bit reduced in the past. And so as we optimize our processes and risk management, this is something I think is an area that we really need to address.
Great, yes, Andy?
So I want to acknowledge that what we've had has worked great. And as we're evolving into a different type of company, that the need to have the in-house counsel seems appropriate. Hearing that there is going to be some revenue issues in the future, that's understandable. Also that the additional need for the council is increasing, so I'm fine with whether it's a person or a firm. Our city uses a firm and it's based on a certain hourly rate. And it's worked out very, very well. We used to have an in-house counsel, in-house lawyer, attorney. And this is one option that we could also be looking
Well,
at.
if we were gonna do that, we would just keep the county council, because that's the cheapest.
That's the cheapest.
Yes.
Okay.
100%, yeah,
Okay.
it's a good deal.
Great. I like
Still not enough.
the safeguard in having the council have a more direct relationship with the attorney, because right now everything's fine, but there could be an issue where maybe it isn't fine. So I just wanted to share that.
That's fair.
But getting to the first step, and then we're gonna interview, and then perhaps our CEO with the chair and the vice chair, or the execs, a couple of people selectively would interview to.
I think you open the door then to having to do the same thing for the CFO and the COO. I mean, you either can't, I don't think it's really appropriate to just pick one C-suite executive.
I think what he's responding to though is that the JPA specifies.
Right.
CEO and, is that where you're going?
Yeah, right.
CEO and general counsel specifically, right?
Okay, but what I'm saying is there's a reason to change that.
Yeah, potentially. But can we go back?
Yeah.
Let's stick with the
Yeah.
framing that you had, which is, let's deal with the in-house question
Sure.
first.
Okay.
So do you have a thought about whether or not to bring it in-house?
I think it's time.
Anyone else? Anders?
I think having the in-house counsel is plus, must have, in order for us to be an independent organization. The legal counsel has to be impartial. And it has to be, has to be independently working for us and not for another organization. Just like Marty said a moment ago, everything is fine today. But we don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. Right, so having an independent legal counsel that works exclusively for us and giving us the legal opinion that is needed. Without creating any other conflicts of interest on the other side. I think it's important for us as we go to point where we can afford it. In fact, I think it might even be a cost saving down the road with a little bit of, runway. I think it's time to do it.
So it seems like everyone's on consensus that we can go in-house, like bring someone in-house. You're okay with that?
Either someone or a firm.
Well, a firm, you wouldn't bring a firm in-house because a commercial firm is gonna charge you like $700 an hour. And
So the city attorney firms that we use, they don't charge at that kind of rate, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to have our own counsel.
do you think it's cheaper than $250 an hour that we get?
So, yeah, to be clear, the county, if we continued with any external, there's no reason to move away from the county, other than this independent issue, which has come up a few times recently, but in general, it works out. I think that the issue here is one of economics and cost, which is if we need more than 60%, we're now absorbing even that extra 50,000 in the future for the time that we actually need. That's the thing. We don't have the time.
It sounds also like you're hampered where you could be using more gen time right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, we need
Your
it.
operations are
We're not
hampered
meeting
by
the
not
demand.
having that.
We are not meeting the demand with the time that we have. So,
And I don't think we're gonna also be able to completely give up using third-party attorneys, because, for example, when Nick does his, bond offerings, we need specific
We need a
expertise
specialist.
in that. So
Our
there's,
resources.
yeah, there's still gonna
Regulatory.
be specific things that we will use and outside, but having sort of a air traffic controller in-house
Project
who's a
manager.
lawyer who can manage those relationships, figure that out, and can keep it, I think is what we're sort of envisioning.
I'm not at all worried about the conflict of interest issue. I think that, Jen is extremely professional. I have zero worry about that issue. I think what Shalini said is very convincing. I think that, it doesn't make sense to me to hire a firm, and, I mean, the terms that our city has with our outside firm, it's a fixed fee. And we agree to that fee with the firm based on the projected amount of work. And some years it's one way and some years it's the other, but it works out in general. I think at an hourly rate, that probably works to our disadvantage because we have increasing need for more time. But if you bring somebody in-house, you avoid that issue. The only problem for me is a financial one, because it's gonna cost us more money initially. And I just think we need to look at where we can cut the budget elsewhere, and we have a huge amount of consulting fees. We should look, we need to generally look at where we can cut this budget, because our revenues are going down 33% and our costs are going up 37%, and that doesn't work. And this is going to be part of that mix, but I think it's the right decision. I think what Shalini said was very convincing.
Okay. So I think we're all on board with that. And then the second question becomes the framework within which, and it sounds like there's a lot of different opinions. So maybe we can explore those just a little bit. Anyone want to start? Yes, Marty.
What do the other CCAs do?
Shalini, are you still on?
I am still on. I think they're a mix. When I was at MCE, I reported to the CEO. I think that is a typical arrangement, but there are other CCAs that have external counsel, similar to our arrangement. I would say I don't love those arrangements, again, because of the reactivity issue that I raised earlier. So I think it's a mix.
My goodness, there's a lot going
I
on.
don't know. Yeah.
The doors auto locked
goes.
at noon because it's the end of meeting time.
Oh.
During our public meetings.
We've been locked in.
No, we've been locked.
We're done. All right, that means we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
So everybody
Thank
get
you,
on to the
Shalini.
next meeting. Okay. So,
Can you try to explain the practical differences between 2 and 3?
So not a lot, but basically we would, in 2, we would actually amend the language in section 3.32 to probably just drop reference to the general counsel. That it would just be that the board is in charge of the hiring and firing of the CEO, okay? And then from a practical point of view, invite the board officers, if they so choose, to participate in annual performance review. Okay, so that would actually be an amendment. 3, you may not have to amend the JPA because the JPA specifically says hiring and firing. It is silent on overall daily management. So you can thread the needle that way, but yes.
maybe on 3, just as I think about that, hiring and firing can be at the recommendation of the CEO. So in other words, but I think what that could mean is that the contract would come to the board for approval. And if there was some sort of a separation agreement, that agreement would come to the board for approval. And that would seem to comply with 3.3.2. So I'm okay with that too. I could live with any one of those. And Marty, I totally understand your concern, which is, what happens if something goes wrong? I do also really believe, the way the board always has the right and responsibility to call anyone from the staff in if we have a question. If we're worried about, if Sean gets really sick and or our CEO were to get really sick and just really not be able to do their job, I could certainly ask Shalini as, our chief operations officer to come in and, help us come up with a plan to sort of cover for someone, or whatever. I mean, we wouldn't have to work through, Sean were in a car accident. I mean, someone were in a car, Sean, I'm just saying, Sean.
Listen, I'm trying to have a good week here.
Sean's gonna have a really good week. If
Sean
Sean
was
was up
traveling,
in,
or the
and
next
gets stuck
person
on the
who's not.
mountain. But I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Like, we can always, it's the board's prerogative to always bring anyone in to have a conversation. So, or for anyone in the staff to, in the C-suite to say to us, I have a serious concern, and they come to the board chair, and the board chair talk to the CEO or make a suggestion that we bring a matter to the board in closed meeting or whatever, if it's a personnel issue or something. There's ways to manage that without that having to be us conducting the person's annual review. So that number 3 seems like a really good compromise to me, but yeah.
I think number 3 retained one aspect that, let's say, Sean, plug up your ears, please. We were concerned about the performance of the CEO or the CEO in conjunction with the COO. Number 3 guarantees the board could say, we want a meeting with general counsel.
Yeah.
And they are accountable to us because we hire and fire. But we still recognize the importance of having general counsel under the day-to-day management of the CEO.
I think,
And the CEO having that participation in the hiring and firing of the general counsel. So it satisfies both.
mhm. Also, the annual performance evaluation, I believe, should be by the CEO. Most certainly, there could be there could be a briefing to the executive committee, which Sean does sort of anyway, when she gives her annual reviews of salaries, and budgets, like, I've reviewed, she and I talk about it. What do we raise Nick to? What do we raise Shalini to? What does this person go to? How does that relate to her salary? There's kind of already, you almost have to do that by default, just to understand. I don't want to find out that Sean's paying herself 3 times more than the
No.
next person. You know what I mean?
No.
No, I mean, but we had someone in here who kind of did that, so we got it. I mean, it's a little bit of sensitivity. So anyway,
Is the first clause of the language in 3 what's currently in 332?
retain general counsel hiring and firing
Yes.
authority only.
Yes.
So it's not
No,
annual.
but is it retain general counsel hiring authority in consultation with CEO? Is that the language of 332?
No, in 332, it's one line, and I'll pull it up and read it, but essentially it says, it's in the section that talks about board powers.
Responsibilities, yeah.
And one is the hiring and firing of the CEO and general counsel.
That's
It's
it.
one line, yeah.
So there's no explicit language saying in consultation with CEO. I think that's just our
Yeah, that's our,
understanding.
Because why would you just go off and hire a lawyer without consulting
Well,
with the
why would
CEO of
we-
the
why
organization?
would
can't
we
really fire without-
Fire this, I
Or
mean,
fire,
the
yeah.
board would
About
have
risk
to, it would
problem.
have to go on to their, yeah, it would have to go onto a board agenda. Sean, for that.
Personally, I don't have any problem changing 332.
Okay,
are
so
you just,
either one works for
yeah,
me.
the hiring and termination of the chief executive officer, general counsel. It says nothing further. So really, practically,
You could just strike
even
out
as a
general
contract employee, the general counsel is reporting up through the CEO and COO.
And I believe the reason that actually came up the first time was because I actually think that Dave brought on county counsel first. And council was involved in setting up the JPA and all the legal documents, so we had to be able to hire the council. And then
Right.
eventually they hired a CEO. So I think it was a chicken and egg situation. As an operating and executive, is an operating entity, I think that there's two things. We could either amend 332 and strike out council
Sure.
and have, you know, Sean would then, it would go like, just like we do with Shalini and with Rick,
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
with Nick. She would have hiring and firing authority. And and we could do it almost the opposite in consultation with the board. I mean, Sean is not gonna fire Shalini, Nick, or our attorney without calling us and talking to us.
Yeah, but I understand, like, I might not always be in this chair.
I understand.
So I think it's smart for you all to be thinking about other
But
scenarios.
I think that there would have to be, you know, many people in this organization can come and go that we're not gonna need to know about, but the C-suite, you know, you just can't operate with the board that way. It just by nature has to come up to the board. So how do you guys feel? Do you wanna have the language specifically amended, or do you wanna, yes, Betsy,
I just, number 3.
you're okay with number 3?
I'm okay with 2 or 3. If people felt strongly about amending, I don't think we're gonna get pushback on that, but I also am fine with 3 and the interpretation that
When
would
are we
lead to.
gonna do our next review of the JPA?
Yeah, Nellie brought that up. So we, in July, are kicking off the kind of evaluation of various committees. I don't know that will result in any kind of
But it
shift,
might.
but there's also some cleanup
Yeah.
language that Nellie wants to look at for policy 16 related to the JPA. Potentially, so we don't have to decide this today,
I
but.
actually
it goes with
think
it.
that the way we could do this would
Later in the
be, the recommendation will be 3, so we can get moving on it. With an understanding that when the JPA is revised, we take a look at how the practicality of this is as a part of a larger and more comprehensive review of the JPA. Does that work for everyone?
Of that.
That's good.
I like it.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's not like a one-off thing, it's just
Correct.
part of the whole
Yeah.
organization.
Cause every time you open that, right, it triggers the 30-day, so we're gonna
Yeah,
bundle it.
so
all
we
up.
let's just bundle it all up into one and get that done.
But this is
One
one
time,
time
one
practice that the CEO actually does all the data.
Yes,
Which
exactly.
is what happens, but
Yeah.
it's.
So the memo to the full board should be like essentially number 3 within the recommendation that we look at the, you know, and I don't think this is a motion. No, it's
No,
not.
it
It's
is not.
just discussion.
Yeah.
Well, and
should
I'd
make
say
public
when
comment.
I think that's a good suggestion, when we amend the JPA, we'll include an amendment to 332.
Exactly.
But we'll go forward with 3 now.
Yeah, 100%. That's efficient.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
That
Okay,
makes Nellie
so if we're
happy.
all in
Yeah, we want
consent.
Nellie happy.
Nellie, we just made you so happy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
It's gonna be the Nellie revision.
But we need to take public comment before.
Do we have
move
any
on.
members of the public who would like to comment on this? Seeing none, I'm gonna close public comment. And item number 7, we can let Jen back in, please. And item number 7 are just any committee member reports. And I have one question.
Mhm.
Our Diablo Canyon,
Yes.
so is that leaving during the day on Sunday, the 20?
Yes, details haven't fully been worked out yet, but the plan is for a bus to, hopefully, bus to drive everyone down on Sunday, spend the night nearby, and then the tour of Diablo Canyon starts at like 8 AM, starts very early. And then do the tour. I think we would do the tour on our bus. It would depend on the number of people. They also have some, like, we could divide into 2 smaller buses. And then return home that evening. Or afternoon.
And if someone couldn't have a conflict on Sunday afternoon, night, like I do.
Drive down.
Drive
could
down
we just
early.
drive- And how long does it take to get down there? Is it like an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Oh, I think it's
3
longer than that.
3 longer
hours.
than that, it's an hour and a
It's
half.
on Central
right?
Coast.
Yeah, that's right. So 3, like it's going to Cal Poly almost,
I
right?
don't know.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's north of San Luis
South.
Obispo,
It's south.
I think, I don't know where it is.
On
That's
Vila
south.
Beach.
From
Would-
here,
Would it be like, I don't mind leaving at 6 AM to get there by 9.
From here,
Why
it's-
me on this?
it's pulling a 4-hour drive right now. If we left
4
right
hour
now, it
drive.
would take
So
4
I don't,
hours.
Nelly, do we have any flexibility? I think the answer is no, but Do we have any flexibility in when we start the tour?
I mean, I don't think so, but that doesn't,
They
it doesn't
dictate
mean
it.
I can't ask. It doesn't
Let's
mean I
ask.
can't try for a little bit
It's
later.
okay, I mean, I just wanna know,
Let's
I just
ask.
wanna understand, because it's cutting into like a weekend thing, and I know a lot of people really have family and stuff and.
Let's see what we can do.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
pretty
talk to
sure
them.
they said no to afternoon, which is why we ended up
In
the
the
day
morning.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can check to see if we can buy an hour or so.
Early morning, I mean, I think I can go, I didn't bring my calendar, but I certainly wouldn't mind a super early morning. I mean, as long as I'm not driving the bus, I'm okay with the early morning.
Rather than staying overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm flexible.
Or if people wanna
but-
go overnight, I can get us halfway there. And for people, I have a little bit of room in my space, I could get people halfway there that night, like, if you wanted to leave at like 8 o'clock or something, or get to 10 o'clock.
Let's see what we
Anyway,
can
we'll
do.
figure it
I'll
out.
see
we'll
what I
get
can
back.
do
We
to
have
push
time.
the
Yeah,
We'll
timeline.
get back to
We
you
have
guys.
time, all right, I'll work on that.
Mapping it for to arrive by 7 AM, it's saying to leave around 3 in the morning, so that's a little
So
brutal.
they want a 7 a.m. arrival.
No, sorry,
Oh.
I put that as 7:40 AM arrival in the maps situation, so it says, if you wanna arrive by 7:40, leave at 3:10 in the morning.
So the tour
8
technically
o'clock
starts at
tour?
8 then?
That's what I believe, that's my recollection,
Pretty
but
soon, but-
I will
I'm gonna
talk to
try.
them and see what
We
we
will
can do.
try to push it out by a couple hours.
Yeah.
And then that way people have the option.
Yes.
Okay.
Options.
I also want to just remind you guys that I will not be, first time. I'm gonna be missing a board meeting this month, later this month. I'd really rather not, but anyway, I'm gonna go to that awards dinner, and so Shalini will be in this chair, and then it's mostly about the budget and Nick's. So he will be here and a bunch of the staff will be here, so sorry to miss you later this month.
For a good reason, yes.
Thanks. And we will be meeting in July for executive committee. We have a number of items.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, okay. If that's it, then we're out.
Okay. Peace out. Everybody have a fabulous day.
Yeah.